2022. The Drum's new pop-up TV channel, which aims to help you make sense of this ever-changing global B2B marketing world. Now, over the next not one, but 2 days, we will be streaming exclusive content filmed right here in our London studio in front of a live audience. I think that is just the start of the trouble ahead. So welcome to everyone, of course, in the room. Welcome to all of our viewers tuning in from all over the world, all corners of the world, in fact. We will be taking a deep dive into all things B2B. We'll have a swim around with the big issues across the B2B marketing sector. And the Drum is absolutely thrilled that leading global B2B brand to demand specialist agency Stein IAS are partnering with us on B2B World Fest. And I would like to give a special thank you to the amazing Tom Stein for being part of this today. Now, with our new pop-up TV format, we'll be able to bring together brands from all over the world and put them in front of the Drum's global audience in a more immersive, engaging, and yes, an exciting way. Now, with everything going on in the world at the moment, including yesterday's election in the US and COP27 in Egypt, B2B marketers have plenty on their minds and frankly on their plates. Then there's inflation, energy costs, interest rates, Ukraine, and now Elon Musk. It's enough to make you fondly remember the relative peace of global lockdown. One of the most frequently used words in B2B marketing during COVID was agility. Yet, with COVID mostly behind us, B2B brands and marketers need to maintain the same agility and urgency, responding to and getting ahead of current and emerging challenges while never taking their eye off of the most important thing, growth and, of course, innovation. So, are you ready to get started, everyone? I think so. Now, we really want to hear from our live stream viewers, and there are thousands, and of course, our studio audience. So do make sure you get in touch using the hashtag B2B World Fest. And we'll make sure to include your comments, your questions, anything like that during today's show. I was going to say keep it clean, but the floor is yours. Say whatever you feel. Now let's get underway with the Drum Show, where our co-founder Gordon Young and his guests are going to be looking at some of the key issues in the B2B world.
Welcome to the Drum Show, which is coming to you as part of our pop-up TV channel dedicated to B2B World Fest 2022. Now, this is a package of around 15 different shows focusing on B2B, which are both being live streamed and made available on the Drum Player. Our job here in this show is to review some of that content and identify some of the biggest trends which are evident across all of those different shows. And I have to say, I'm delighted to be joined by a crack panel to do just that. So we have Jen Fall, who is a Deputy Editor of The Drum. Welcome. We have Craig Duxbury, who is the Client Service Director of Stein IAS. Welcome. And Dave Burse, who is well known in the B2B landscape. We do a lot of work for LinkedIn, creative, consultant, all-round nice guy, author, to name a lot of stuff, so welcome.
Thank you.
And basically the reason I'm quite excited to have this crack panel is because one of the key trends we see in B2B is that it is becoming a lot more creative. Now, the Drum is launching the B2B Awards in December. The Drum Awards for B2B, to give them their full name. And in a moment, I thought we could maybe review some of the nominations, because I think that really sort of makes the point. But before we get into that, I thought it might be a good idea to maybe, Jen, if you could sort of give us some highlights of what you expect to see in B2B World Fest.
It's an exciting couple of days that we've got ahead. Coming today, we're going to have a great panel discussion on a topic that's on every marketer and agency's mind, which is in a global recession, how do you find growth efficiently? So we're going to have top execs from both agency and brands on to discuss that in the Growth Show. And then we're going to have MasterCard's Chief Marketing and Communications Officer also on to give us some of his insights into B2B strategy. And finally, we're going to hear from Michelle Klein, the VP of Global Business at Meta, who's going to give us an in-depth look at both the opportunities and obstacles for B2B brands looking to get into the metaverse.
Yes, and that's actually a really interesting interview. And incidentally, all these shows, if you're not watching, live, these shows Jen referred to are all available on the Drum Player. But Michelle Klein is obviously interesting because as we broadcast, the big news today was 11,000 redundancies at Meta. Don't know if obviously the John's been writing a lot about that this morning. Have you any views on it, Jen? Or?
Yeah, well, I think we'll have to see how these redundancies play out and where they come from. Meta, it's been a year since they rebranded. They have pumped tens of billions into this and are obviously, decades away, I think some analysts have said, from making it profitable. So we'll have to see where these cuts come from, how much of a priority the metaverse still is to them. But I think for brands and agencies, the small investments that they've already been making suggests that...
Yeah, but I have to say that Michelle's interview is really great, actually, because although despite the bit doom and gloom, she did give her real insights into the possibilities for this technology, and I think we've got a clip now we can share with you just to sort of inspire you into what these possibilities might be.
If I were to, some examples that have really stood out to me, last year, the Smithsonian Arts and Industries partnership in Washington that we did with the Smithsonian Institution was to partner with Meta and P&G to produce this incredible AR and VR moonwalk, like actually being able to walk on the moon. And I guess came together and they were able to go on this lunar journey and had the experience as though they were Neil Armstrong in 1969. And one of the guests who was there was this wonderful, sort of takeaway, which was, I never thought I'd make it to the moon before I flew on an aeroplane.
Yeah, so it's an example of a really nice campaign, and part of me maybe thinks actually, the market has been unduly cynical about the strategy. But I know, Dave, you've got views where maybe you don't think we've been cynical enough.
No, I'm very sceptical about this whole thing. I wonder if this whole thing is a little bit like 3D television, where it seemed exciting at the beginning, but where is it now? And I was involved in VR at the very beginning, so I used to run VR, or I used to host the VR Fest in the UK every year, and I got to speak with the people who were at the forefront of VR. And the thing is not necessarily about the technology for me, but it's about the audience, and it's about when do they find the moments for this isolatory, strapped-in experience. And we've been finding over the years that most people just aren't finding those moments. It's because there's something very isolationary. It's you're locking yourself away from the rest of your family. And do you have the space in your own house to shove on this headset and have that moment?
I don't know, locking yourself away from the rest of your family. You're selling it.
Actually, come to think of it, sorry, go back in everything.
Yeah, but Craig, maybe this is an unfair question to spring on you. We do actually touch on this a bit later on in the show, actually, but I think if virtual reality is not the thing, maybe mixed reality is, and I think there's lots of B2B applications for mixed reality, isn't there?
I was going to say, if I was to put my B2B headgear on, I think that's where the opportunities really are for it, because of it's not as frivolous, I'd say, for doing those things. I think it can have real value to society, to real-world causes when you think of medical, when you think of education, learning, when you think of architects' visions for the future of smart cities or whatever that may be. I think the applications or the use cases, as we'd refer them to, I think you could find some really useful, creative opportunities to bring to life what is currently not tangible, intangible, going through structures, seeing things in different ways. So I think it'd be good.
Yeah, there's a bit of Google Glass syndrome. So remember, with Google Glass, it failed because they marketed it as a mass market product rather than a niche product, which would be fantastic for so many B2B applications. And I think that augmented reality and metaverse is a bit like that, where maybe it's finding those niche uses, those B2B uses, as a way of finding some kind of financial model for it, not necessarily doing it as a mass market.
Yeah, but what is actually, I think, quite exciting, and I suppose this touches on your point, Craig, is that I do think B2B is becoming a lot more creative, and you definitely see that with how they're using innovations like augmented reality, and as I say, I'll show you an example of that in a moment. But I think the thing I like about the sector, and the thing I like about the B2B Awards, is you actually see examples of that creative process which are not necessarily part of the communications, but actually part of the service and the product development. And there's a really good example on your screen at the moment, which is by a company called Red Wing, who are Fifth Ring Communications did this campaign. And basically the idea there was that they discovered that women's overalls, workers' overalls, for God's sake, these big orange suits.
It's a PPE, wasn't it?
Yeah, PPE, never designed for women. So what they did was they actually went out and designed an overall specifically for women. And it's one of those things, why had nobody thought of doing that before? Now I say it, that's so obvious, that's not creative, but I think it probably is, because it was preventing women being efficient, preventing them being safe, and also it's preventing them from getting jobs like in the North Sea, for example, because there weren't survival suits designed for the shape of a women's body.
I think there's a couple of things there. I think the first one is the power of insight. To even recognise, I don't think that's a marketing solution, which is what I think is really clever about this particular case study, is that, yeah, the power of insight for recognising that is great. And then I think it's the power of the product. So it's good to see the product come to the fore as well. At times, the product isn't the hero. It's hard to find that in B2B.
Yeah.
To find differentiation within the product, you normally have to look to the customer or invent something different. So, yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah. Another interesting thing about what you see in the B2B Awards is how they're moving away into storytelling. And again, actually, the connection here is, I suppose, this almost fashion-related, as well as inclusivity-related. But LinkedIn are nominated for this campaign, which we're going to show you now. Yeah, this was a campaign LinkedIn did for ex-offenders, and it was really about basically showing them there's more to life. So here's the film.
So as you know, this is the Inside Out clothing project, and it's the first time it's ever happened, and you guys are going to be the pioneers really for this project.
The program's based around prisoners coming out and doing something positive in the community, putting together a clothing line to make the clothes, learning how to sell the clothes, and then ultimately have a pop-up shop.
That's great. So Dave, obviously, storytelling, we're going to see a lot more of that. Do you don't think it's a good trend, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there has been this whole thing, there's a left brain, right brain BS that people talk about, and how B2B has been so much about the rational side of the brain. It's been all thinking that the way that people in business make decisions is just this sort of checkbox mentality. But we know that people make decisions based on emotions and then back it up with rationality, whether it's B2B or whether it's B2C. And I think that that's a fantastic thing to do, is just, whatever we do is just to try to make people feel something and to understand it's not just about the heartlessness of business. It is about humans, and it's about humans making decisions and doing stuff within organisations. And the more that we can embrace that, the better.
Yeah, it's good. Another thing, the other trend we're seeing, Craig, is that purpose is becoming much more of a B2B agenda, which is surprising in a way, because you use B2B very much lead gen orientated, but more people are sort of trying to embrace purpose and ensuring their marketing budgets can actually make a difference at the same time as marketing their businesses.
I think that's going to be a fascinating thing for the next 2 days, because we're here. The themes: have we found reached the golden age of B2B, and creativity is right at the top of that. And if you look at the trends, if you look at the Cannes Lions, if you look at the drive with effectiveness, there's so much, there's so much positive movement to that way. And I think purpose has been around for some time. I think where the challenge is now to B2B marketers is not just the purpose, but there's a commercial aspect as well to doing that, and there's making sure that we're not falling into the greenwashing aspect of purpose, but the brand and the brand strength and the narrative and the story which is told behind that has got that real authenticity within it, and the people behind it have got that pride within that. And I think, everyone's going to hear a lot about that over the course of the next 2 days.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, not only here, but in Egypt, everyone's talking about the COP27 is underway. But with that in mind, you can't really talk about purpose without talking about climate change. And another nominee, which I thought was great, in fact, I think we are going through a golden era of B2B at the moment, was for an organisation called Climeco. And I just wanted to show you this film as well, because I think it's quite strong.
Large amounts of populations that are living a modern lifestyle with modern products simply don't have the modern infrastructure built to deal with it. It's a severe problem that needs a lot of attention, that needs resources, that needs the right commitment from companies who want to be part of the solution. Climeco set out from the beginning to improve environmental and social conditions around the world. So much of the developing world has had to rely on plastic for safety and for food, but then they have nothing to do with it. There's really little or no existing waste management infrastructure. It's an economic problem, it's a social problem, a health problem that is really beyond the scope of government and philanthropy to tackle.
Yeah, and that's a great story. I think anybody who's ever been to places like Vietnam is aware of the amount of plastic waste because really these places maybe don't have such access to clean water. So even water, they have to use a lot more plastic containers. So the idea here is rather than carbon credits, this company has started doing plastic credits, which they're using as a way of fundraising from larger companies and then to finance cleanup schemes. But I think, Jen, you've been following this story a bit.
Yeah, it's just such a great campaign, isn't it? And gives other businesses such a compelling reason to then work with that company. It's sort of the emotion in it and the storytelling is great.
Yeah, and it's the storytelling as well, isn't it? I mean, it's a beautifully made little film, and you can see it on full on the Drum B2B Awards website. But, as I said, COP27 is Egypt at the moment. COP26 in Glasgow last year. A lot of the B2B Awards are actually dealing with COP26. And it was actually a really strong film from Hitachi, which again, I thought you'd like to see.
To some, carbon zero are just 2 words uttered at summits. 2 words for the future to worry about. To others, carbon zero is not something you talk about, it's something you do.
Yeah, but again, a really nice little film. I think the idea, Jen, there was that this was a carbon neutral film all the way from the making of the film to the screening of the film.
Yeah, well, I think they claimed a first with that, didn't they?
Yep.
First mover advantage is always great for a brand. I think as well it just speaks to the sort of craft and investment as well that they've put into making that film. Yeah, it's an excellent bit of work.
Yeah, and what I quite liked about it is, I suppose being a journalist, I like the old stunt. So to actually create a moment in time which you can then sort of hang a whole lot of sort of social of. But again, I know that, Dave, this is something you've been talking about, the importance of these sort of stunts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's is when we're doing something in the world of communications, it's not necessarily seeing our job as to be filling a rectangle of media space, which is traditionally what a lot of people in the communications industry have been all about. But instead, it's about seeing how we can use that piece of that rectangle that we've got to get people talking about it. How can you use that to get Graham Norton talking about it in the first 5 minutes of his show? How can you do that to get Trevor Noah talking about it? And stunts are a fantastic way of doing stuff. And stunts have traditionally been in the PR world. But if you look at all of the case studies that you get, particularly for B2C advertising, they all end with the amount of PR they've generated. So you can actually say that everything that's been done, all the advertising work, is in fact PR, because that's the bit that we judge it on, is how many people talked about it afterwards. So stunt and generating conversation has become such a big thing that the industry is based on. It'd be great to see more of that in B2B.
Yeah, and you've seen that trend as well, Craig?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's one thing on that as well, which is highlighted it for me, is the purpose there around what we generate as an industry from filmmaking and advertising within it. And I think that's why, off record, if I'm right, why Sam Mendes narrated that within it as well. But I think that's a great example of linking that back to purpose, but to be able to pull that back into your products and then tell that story, which makes that connection back from purpose into, the fabric of what you do as a brand. I think it's actually they did a great job of it.
Yeah, but it's interesting though that I love this idea of people creating a moment. Just sort of doing a stunt, create a moment, and then it gives you an excuse to sort of generate all that stuff. There's another great example, which was Spotify, who decided to use the data on Spotify to create music for certain chief marketing officers. And maybe we can show you that film quickly.
We have unique insight into our listeners' true tastes and musical sweet spots. And because CMOs use our platform, just like millions of our listeners, we were able to create something unique to them.
Let me get this straight. You want to speak to CMOs by writing original songs about them based on the data that you pulled on them. And I said, sounds like a great idea.
Rachel Ferdinando, Chris like Doritos, CMO of Frito.
Yeah.
So good.
But it's brilliant because the other thing there is about the power of personalisation, isn't it? And obviously, I think B2B is particularly well placed. I know Stein IS are absolutely brilliant in terms of their automated marketing systems. But this is really just a form of that, isn't it?
I mean, this is cool. This just really encapsulates the whole thing of insight, data, creativity, media. And to target, I think it was the top 14 CMOs, and personalisation is really the holy grail that all marketers are now trying to go on, and it'd be great to see how they could kind of take that on to the next levels and mass produce that many songs into it. But that's a work of that's class. It really is.
But the other big trend, which is relevant to you, we're going to show one of your nominations actually, is emotions sort of creeping back into the business. We talked about the lead gen, but actually people are emotional. One of the emotions is humour. And I just wanted to show this nomination for Juniper Networks, which I thought was a good example of getting a joke in. Go and have a look for Juniper Networks.
Hey, the update we just made in all our data centers?
Yeah?
Our stores are having a payment issue. It's hot.
What's the issue?
Customers can't make payments.
That's a hot issue. How long to roll back every data center?
Hey, you know it doesn't have to be this way, right? Juniper's assurance software can find and fix your problems before they become fires. And it works with any vendor's hardware.
We need that.
Yeah. Do you want to get barbecue for lunch?
I'm a vegetarian.
Yeah. Now, obviously, Dave, you used to work for Juniper Networks, I'd imagine, because you're...
Yeah, I mean, my huge head of hair disappeared overnight. It's terrible, yeah.
But again, been working with you for the last few years, Dave. I know that you think humour is really an underused tool.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's one of the things that we saw, actually, a few years ago. I was writing a report for D&AD looking at trends in their work, and we discovered that humour had dropped. That was one of the things that we'd noticed in the awards. And it's something that is really important. When you get a joke, you're actually, as the audience, doing part of the work. So if you imagine it's like completing a circle. So when you get the joke, you're completing the circle. And that has an effect on the brain that we know neuroscience-wise, it actually gives you a dopamine reward. If you're getting a dopamine reward that you can then associate with that brand made me feel that little moment of pleasure, that can only be a good thing.
Yeah.
So from a neuroscience point of view, it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, you guys made this, so you obviously agree.
It's a brave client. If you think of Juniper as infrastructure, IT, it's something which isn't really synonymous with that level of, creativity within it. And I think that is a great example of brands who are looking to tell a bigger story than where they may play within in any particular ecosystem or space or sector. Yeah, just again, humour, brave move to do that within B2B.
Yeah,
and looking to build that brand in different channels as well, to start looking at TV and different forms of digital media for doing that, then yeah, that's a hats off to them for doing it.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I mean, this has been an exhausting session. I think, unfortunately, we're just about out of time, but that's a very good note to end on. Use humour. I mean, that'd be my big takeaway. I should also thank our judges, or the chair of our judges for the B2B Awards, who are John Brockelman, who's the CMO of State Street Global, and also Katie Stretton of WRG, who sort of waded through these thousands of entries. And the awards themselves are on the 5th of December. They're part of the Drum Awards, the Drum Awards Festival. We're going to do, how many? 10 awards in 1 week? 2 a day for a week. Holy hell, you think this panel session's been exhausting? That is going to be exhausting. But as I say, sadly, that's all we've got time for. I have to say a massive thanks to our incredible panel. Thanks to our really patient studio audience. Thanks to you guys for watching. Remember, this show, together with everything to do with B2B World Fest, will be available on the Drum Player. So I hope you really enjoyed the content. But anyway, thanks once again for watching.
I'll see you later. Hi, come in, I've been waiting for you. It's so full on. I've just started my new underwear business, but I really needed some exposure.
Our concept was to partner with Rob and Malcolm in real life and to launch a real underwear business, to show small Kiwi businesses how easy it is to take their small business kind of out of the garage and launch it into the real world using Yellow's digital products. So we worked with Robin to create a real underwear business. And from the very inception of the idea, so we approached her initially and asked her if she'd be interested in partnering with us to take this concept and bring it into the real world. And it turns out that her lifelong dream was to start an underwear business. So even her character in the show had an underwear business, but actually in real life, she wanted to start one, and it had always been her dream. And ironically, she had just been talking about it with her sister. And our concept was actually something that she was genuinely interested in. So we partnered with her and we created a business from scratch using Yellow digital products. So we founded the business. We worked with her to develop the products, and she had this kind of checklist of things that she wanted for the underwear. It needed to be natural, organic, made in New Zealand, for real women. For over a 6-month period, we developed with Robin an underwear business, and we launched it as an online store using Yellow's digital website product, e-commerce product. And we marketed it through Yellow's digital marketing tools. So we used search marketing, Facebook marketing, and then we obviously had the campaign as well that sat behind the concept. We created a TV ad with the concept being get more exposure with Yellow digital. And the opening of the ad is Robin opening the front door of her house, and you walk into her home and you see the chaos of what it's like as a small business owner who's actually really starting a business. And she kind of takes you over to her kitchen bench, and she shows the viewer her digital dashboard with all of her performance figures coming through. And then so supporting that, we had some outdoor activity, digital billboards where we teased the campaign. We had the Yellow logo, and we had kind of a piece of Robin sort of starting from the bottom, and then her in her undies, and then we teased it all the way up over a 5-day period. We had performance digital, social media, and the kind of execution strategy was to connect with small business. It was kind of twofold. The first was to connect with small business owners when they were working on their business, which was kind of in the evening, kind of in those wind down weekend moments. And that's where we showed the video ad. And then we had more performance driving media where we really worked hard to convert small business owners to use Yellow digital products. And that was when they were actually working in their business. So, and that's where we used performance marketing, and, we promoted our how-to guides and the behind the scenes where Robin, showed the viewer or showed small New Zealand business owners how to actually start their own business in real life, and how to use search marketing, and how to create a website, and how to create a brand Facebook page, and how to use Facebook for their digital marketing. All the things that are really hard for someone who doesn't understand digital marketing, who's kind of quit their job and decided to start their dream and to launch, their own business. And so we've sort of provided them with that support through our digital performance marketing. So Yellow is a brand that has been around for decades, and everyone knows Yellow as the Yellow Pages. And, over the last kind of 10, 20 years with the rise of digital media, Yellow have been transforming internally to become more digitally led. They still have the Yellow Pages, and it's still a really big part of their business. So no one knew that actually Yellow offered all these amazing digital marketing products. So they had a huge product awareness problem. And we partnered with a research company, and we ran some quantitative research. And we kind of further disproved the point that awareness for the Yellow Pages book was like 96%. It was really, really high. And awareness for Yellow offers search campaigns or Yellow offers websites was really low. It was like Yellow offers search campaigns, I think it was like 15%, and websites was 11%. We really just needed to communicate that, that Yellow's no longer just the Yellow Pages, that there's so much more to Yellow. We partnered with Dynata, which is the world's largest third-party quantitative data platform, and we ran a bespoke piece of research to understand, first of all, what the SME market was in New Zealand, how many of them had digital products, what their goals were, and what challenges they were facing. And what we found from that is New Zealand has a lot of really kind of young small businesses. So businesses with a tenure of under 5 years, there's a really large portion of them. They actually really struggle to take their business and to take their dream out of the garage. So often small businesses start at home, and they start in the garage, or they start on the kitchen bench, or at the dining room table. And actually getting them out of that and growing their business is actually really hard. And they have these kind of false dreams and these false perceptions that starting a business is really easy. It's actually not that easy. So, we really wanted to kind of give them a leg up and to really help them grow their business using digital marketing. Because we'd partnered with Robin Malcolm, and she had this underwear business, An Outrageous Fortune, the media just went wild over that. We didn't mention it in our advertising, but the media did. And because, Robin's character, Cheryl West, in the show was so well known. So from a product awareness perspective, the campaign worked really well to move the needle from, yellow just offers the yellow pages. Suddenly we kind of had increased our product awareness for our product offering as well. And, at the same time, we generated leads. So the leads had surpassed our kind of our objective so much that we actually had to turn the campaign off because yellow couldn't keep up with the leads that we had generated. So all around, it was a really effective campaign, and Robin's undies, they sold out, and we donated all of the profits to the Aunties charities. So it kind of worked from all aspects, really. And the Robin's undies business, it still exists, and Robin has taken it over, and she's running the business with her sister.
Sweeties, I'll see you later. Hi, come in. I've been waiting for you. It's so full on. I've just started my new underwear business, but I really needed some exposure. So I called Yellow because they really know Kiwi business, and they sorted me out with my own online store and super targeted search ads, and now my undies are flying out the door.
As we were talking to them, we found one really prevailing insight that really inspired how we answered the rest of the brief, and that was that breastfeeding was like the cruelest joke after labour that no one prepares you for. We needed to really reveal that there's so many different realities when it comes to breastfeeding. So we needed to sort of stand up and change the status quo and reveal these different breastfeeding stories and different routes into breastfeeding to really properly prepare pregnant mums for what was to come.
Sustainability is one of the areas of greatest excitement and opportunity in B2B. So what a great way to start B2B World Fest. Now, I'm always fascinated with the work that goes into live pop-up TV, and I'm sure you'll appreciate the amazing results as we stream hours of content, I did say hours, of content over the next couple of days.
Lynn, up next, we have a fascinating keynote for everybody. A little over a year ago now, the name appeared in that global digital landscape, and it was Meta. The company that everybody formerly knew as Facebook. And that's quickly become virtually synonymous with everything to do with metaverse. This takes on bigger meaning by the day. And for all of us, there's questions which run through our head in terms of where does the metaverse fit in B2B marketing plans? But also, what does the short term look like? And what are the areas where those opportunities exist? And the longer term. Now, the good thing is there's nobody better to answer these questions than our next guest. We're very honoured to have Michelle Klein, the VP of Global Business Marketing at Meta, with us. And I'm now delighted to hand over to our host for the show, Ken Heim, who's the Drum's US editor. Over to you, Ken.
So the metaverse is evolving by the day, but where do B2B marketers slot in? There's obviously lots of opportunities, and of course there's challenges, there's a little bit of confusion. As we move forward into 2023, we're fortunate to have with us Michelle Klein from Meta. She is VP of Global Business Marketing. Welcome.
Thank you.
And she's going to kind of give us the lay of the land and share some tips and tactics and clear up a little bit of that confusion. So Michelle, I'm going to jump right into it. There's misconceptions about Meta and the metaverse. What do we need to know? What does the audience need to know?
Well, what I'd start by saying is that, every decade or so, a new technological platform emerges and people, consumers, businesses begin to embrace it. If you think back, when we started working together, actually, there wasn't such a thing. It was just the beginning of social media, and businesses and brands were thinking about how to get on board with that and connect with consumers. And so the biggest opportunity, and I think the misconception to overcome, is that for us at Meta, we aren't going to build this next computing platform alone. In fact, we've been very clear publicly about how this is going to be built together. And the difference, I think, between that philosophy versus, the birth of the internet, the birth of, mobile technology, is that originally the conception of those technologies was mainly built for either governments or, a different use case, not necessarily with consumers in mind. And then consumers came to embrace that technology and businesses adapted. And that's why we're really focused on building this in partnership with, so many different developers and, government institutions and, researchers and so much more, so that we really get it right.
Excellent. So for the B2B marketers out there, they're looking at their budgets, for 2023, making plans, deciding where they're going to invest and experiment. And obviously we're in an experimental phase in many ways. What are some of the opportunities that they need to be thinking about, when they look at the metaverse, not, whether it pertains to working with you or just as the ecosystem as a whole?
Well, I think sort of building on what I just said is when we think about where consumers are at, where, it doesn't matter what platform you're actually thinking about building to reach your consumers, it's what consumers really want from businesses these days. And we recently released a report through our Meta Foresights team, which is all about what Gen Zs expect from brands. And it's really about diversity in advertising. And I think this is really pertinent across all of marketing, B2B, B2C, and all platforms, that the next generation of your consumers want to see brands really embrace diversity and purpose in what they do. And so when you think about building for the metaverse, whether you're B2B or B2C, it's critical to think about how you're going to reflect the future consumer in the content that you're producing. And we have run a couple of experiments where we've partnered with our Elevate program, which is focused very much on training the Black and Latinx community across America to get the digital skills and mentorship that they need, bringing those businesses and partners together with creators to create AR filters that can be run through advertising. And this is just a great way to partner in conjunction with communities around the world to get this right. And so it's stuff like this that we really want businesses to be thinking about, for marketers to be thinking about. And it sort of applies to any platform that you're working through. There's sort of three main points as you plan your 2023 strategy, which is how can you deepen your connection with your customers today? What are the technologies that are available where they're at, where you can actually build those relationships in a pertinent way? And that might lead to the metaverse in tomorrow's future. Experiment, set aside a small amount of your budget to think about what you can be doing differently. There's a great example, we can come back to it later, from Wendy's, where they built a Wendyverse. I know you've been interested in that, in the metaverse, as a way to really build a connection with their consumers around the March Madness moment. So that's an experimental budget, and netted out some really good results for them. And then lastly, going back to where I started, is engage with diverse suppliers across all of your marketing investments, because it's through those suppliers that you'll actually be able to build a more inclusive future in everything that you do.
Yeah, and it is interesting because I think in the past, B2B marketers tended to not be the most experimental, forward-thinking. I hate to generalize, but I'm sure some of them were, avant-garde. But now they are. I think that after lockdown, they became, a lot of the B2B marketers became really digitally savvy and understand that the decision-making group, because B2B decisions are so complex and they require so many people, some of the influencers are much younger. So spaces like the metaverse becomes much more important. Mm-hmm. So with that, you mentioned Wendy's. I think it's really interesting because, a lot of people there, there's bars in the metaverse, Nike selling shoes in Roblox, Snoop is buying land in Sandbox. It seems like a little, fantastical in a way. But, even if it wasn't a B2B example, but keeping a B2B marketer in mind and who their target is and what they're trying to do, what are some things that have actually happened that have been successful that they should be thinking about and maybe adapting for their purposes?
Yeah. If you think about the use case in some instances with the metaverse and Web3 right now, actually, it's, some of the examples that have really resonated with me as I think about, okay, where could I take this as a marketer, B2B or B2C, are examples where, the metaverse is being used to create or recreate the experience through airports and look at airport traffic, or town planning and things like that. So when you start to imagine, okay, what could that lead to, then you can really get into the B2B space, because there are so many opportunities where businesses are trying to reach other businesses to explain their proposition. And often a lot of these purchase cycles have really long lead times. A fantastic example that's resonated with me was through Hilton Hotels, which used the Quest technology to bring the hotel experience into the boardroom. So a lot of their corporate staff members don't actually, they walk the floors of the hotels, but they don't necessarily walk in the hotels themselves. So that was a great way to, bring the boardroom together and understand the hotel experience and provide training for their employees at that level. So there are examples like that. And so, what we're doing is certainly trying to explain to businesses, how can you start to use some of these new technologies to, reach, find, grow customers and build your brand. And you were with me recently at Ad Week, and we looked at how we brought that story to life through a new campaign that we're pioneering across the world, which is about meeting Meta and new connections that can be made through existing technologies that we already have, like video and Reels and Instagram, but also new technologies like AR filters and things that I mentioned. And the way that we do that is we use case studies from other clients to really tell that story. And that's the most powerful way. Rather than us telling the story of what you can do, why not hear it from, a client that's actually experimenting? So wonderful examples from brands like Lacoste, who are using AR and VR to, bring fashion to life and create an immersive experience, and other more tried and tested technologies like brands like Clinique, who are using Instagram drops to actually get new products to market really quickly, like shortening the cycle by 7 weeks through technology like Instagram. So I think there's just, there's a ton of examples out there, and it's about picking the right mix of technologies to get that story across. And, what we usually say is experiment a little bit where it's right. Use Horizon workrooms if that's an opportunity, like I mentioned with Quest. And then think about AR filters, VR opportunities for 3D immersive technologies and video. and then the tried and tested Reels, Instagram, and ads on Facebook that really work.
As you go through these exercises with clients and they're coming in and they're like, well, what can we do? And how does the metaverse fit into that? Obviously, virtual product demonstrations is an amazing example. We just did an article on Marriott using another hotel chain, coincidentally using it for training. So there are these different use cases. But what are the kind of challenges when it comes to, planning, a B2B marketing effort in the metaverse? What are some of the things that they need to overcome or be thinking about or keep in mind?
I think, as I mentioned, there's sort of longer lead cycles sometimes in certain verticals. That's really important. But one study that came out, we commissioned last year, was around B2B brands and what they're doing. And actually what was interesting to us was that 65% told us that they're more likely to have communicated to their buyer through social media during the decision-making process, which is a big shift. When you think about how brands have historically, or B2B marketing has historically been far more below the line in many cases. And, as I said, with the longer lead times in terms of purchase. But I think what's interesting also is the opportunity with messaging, in particular business messaging around WhatsApp or Messenger. We just launched a partnership with GeoMart, which is an Indian-based partnership, and it's the first of its kind. It's through WhatsApp, and it allows the seamless integration between people to browse products, add items to their carts, make payments, sort of complete the entire purchase cycle, all within a WhatsApp chat thread. And so when you think about that, if you're, the product you're sort of trying to get and shorten the distance to get to your consumer, I really think it's important to watch business messaging as a platform that is emerging. It's certainly growing across the world, and millions of people are embracing that as just a different way to think about how you might do CRM in the future and how you might actually get direct to consumer in a way that we haven't actually seen before. So those are some of the things that you should be thinking about. I think the other thing is that B2B, I always say this doesn't have to be boring. I say this to my team all the time. We all make decisions through hearing creative stories and feeling that emotional connection, no matter what the purchase is that you're making and the conversion, if you're on the marketing side that you're trying to drive. So really thinking about how to tell, short, emotive stories through the right technology is critical. A nice example from Square, which is a financial services company, have used our platforms to test creative recommendations through video and have found that they have reduced their cost per action by 22% just by really perfecting that short form video. So, there are plenty of levers to pull if you're in B2B. I would say, make it immersive, make it creative. Don't let it be boring, experiment in new technologies and continue to think about what's possible and measure, because you have to know the outcome of everything that you're putting out there in the world, and then you can double down on your investment.
Right. So, one thing I always like to do, and it's because you probably know a lot more than most of us. 5 years from now, if you've got a crystal ball out, and I know you won't have it all figured out, but, what are some things that might happen? The B2B marketers should be thinking about and, saying, oh, this is where I can be using these technologies to help, tell my story and persuade people to buy my product and all that.
What's so interesting is that it's only been just over a year since we shared our vision for the metaverse and, rebranded our company Meta. And it's actually amazing to see how much has happened in that time and how many fantastic ideas have emerged, and whether they're experimental or whether they're fundamental to the business proposition. We talked about some examples earlier. You're seeing this explosion of driving connection through the future of social technology in this space. And so if I were to some examples that have really stood out to me, last year the Smithsonian Arts and Industries partnership in Washington that we did with the Smithsonian Institution was to partner with Meta and P&G to produce this incredible AR and VR moonwalk, like actually being able to walk on the moon. And I guess came together and they were able to go on this lunar journey and it had the experience as though they were Neil Armstrong in 1969. And one of the guests who was there was this wonderful, sort of takeaway, which was, I never thought I'd make it to the moon before I flew on an airplane. And so I think it's examples like that. And looking back and seeing what's been accomplished in the last couple of months alone with businesses, brands, educators, industries taking these steps forward. And I think we're just going to see so much more in the coming months and years. And although we say it's about 5, maybe even 10 years away, because we need to really invest in building this together with developers and creators and so on, there are lots of ways you can take advantage today. And so I mentioned some of the examples before around using AR filters and, dipping a toe into VR if it's right for your strategy. And I think that, where I started around what the use case is for, sort of government's town planning and B2B examples actually starts to, stimulate lots of opportunities for it to go even further. So I don't think there are any bounds to how creative we can be in the future. It'll be about doing what's right, what's driving your goals as a business, and ensuring that you can measure those.
Yeah, I mean, some natural fits are, of course, events. B2B is so heavy on events, like bringing events to people who can't attend in person, in a richer fashion. There's lots of applications. I could see that and product demonstrations, because a lot of the products are so complex, allowing people to understand, this is why we're better, and so on and so forth. So one more question, and then I'm going to ask you to share one actionable insight with all of our viewers and our audience, and one thing they should be keeping in mind as they make all of their plans. Tell us a little bit. Well, I've been deep in the metaverse and all this, but some of Meta's other products, platforms, things that B2B marketers should be thinking about, perhaps maybe differently in 2023 as they plan, things that might help them, communicate that message using these different, you've got lots of other great stuff. So tell us.
First of all, I would say that as a my history as a B2C and B2B marketer is that you need to think of your customer or your consumer as a whole person. Certainly in across our family of apps, people use our products and platforms for personal use cases as well as business use cases. And I think that applies regardless of what industry you're in, because the buyer these days is not necessarily just, sort of enterprise related, or, it might be, somebody who's actually consuming your products in different ways. So, think about the whole person as you go and build your strategies, and think about what your proposition is, both B2B and B2C, and where the synergies lie, and where the overlaps are. I think the other thing is, I mentioned measure. There's obviously, we're in a different sort of economic state. And I think it's important more than ever. Marketing is a cost center on a P&L, and often is the first thing that gets chopped. And so it's important that you have the right tools in place before you do anything, any experimenting, any strategy to measure that. You sat in my panel last week or the week before with Kevin O'Leary, and he really talked about do you truly understand the cost of acquisition? Like, what is the customer acquisition cost? And are you, turning the right dials to really make sure you're extracting lifetime value and maximum value, and then, pivoting as much as possible. And I'd say the last thing I would make sure that you are very clear on as you think about the future is that the creativity that we can bring, even in times of constraints, is more critical than ever. You think about some of the businesses that are imagined and born in, the face of economic headwinds or downturns or dot-com busts and bubbles bursting. Some of the most innovative companies and ideas come in that moment. So rather than seeing, maybe a world of scarcity when it comes to budget, but think of a world of abundance when it comes to ideation, and how you can actually, bring the best of what marketing can offer to drive business goals.
Yeah, I mean, this is when marketing really shines. When you're
that's right.
There's a lot of opportunity. So, okay. So if there's one piece of advice, and it doesn't have to be metaverse really, it could be anything. For all of everybody who's watching, what would you recommend as somebody, and you've been a marketer at Diageo, you've been at Meta now, you've got lots of wisdom. So what's the one thing you'd share?
I would say it's just be customer obsessed. Be obsessed with your customer. know them, understand them, know what drives them and motivates them. Make sure that you are, pulling all the insights and research and information that you can have at your disposal to really shape what you're trying to put out in the world, and be able to adapt to those trends as your customers shift, whether they shift in their use of technology, whether they shift in their use of how they're, embracing your products. It's not just B2B marketers that need to be customer obsessed. It's the entire company. The food chain through all the way up to the C-suite is the most critical thing, that everybody understands the customer and is customer centric. And I think that's really helped us in our work shape our strategy, always putting the customer at the heart of everything that we do, using the technologies that are right for them, ensuring that the experience is seamless. We always say, meet your customers where they are. And what we mean by that is, if they're not adapting or responding to the marketing and the communication you're putting out there in certain channels, don't do it. Think about where they are and embrace it in that way. CMOs have to be like a Swiss Army knife these days. You have to have every skill set pretty much. It's no longer just, build a beautiful 30-second, story on that you can press play in the boardroom and everybody, starts to cry. It's really understand the ROI and ensure that you are building, business strategies for the company to grow in the future. And I think that even as you start to put your toe in the water with the future of technology, make sure that you have, really robust measurement plans around that to understand what it's actually doing to drive your business and how you can best report that back, not just to the C-suite, but also to the board, and ultimately build, this holistic customer experience.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your thoughts and your time. And thank you everybody who's in our audience and everybody who's watching at home or in the office or on a train, wherever you may be. We've got lots of other great stuff in the rest of B2B World Fest. And thank you again, Michelle.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Well, fascinating insights for sure about the metaverse and how it will evolve as a viable environment for B2B organisations, of course, to build strong brands in the years ahead. I have to say, I'm so envious of Michelle's hair. Doesn't she have the perfect hair? So I'm going to have to give her a call. She's going to need to teach me how to do it. Now, if you have just joined us, welcome to B2B World Fest, the Drums pop-up TV show. Now, over the next 2 days, we are live streaming content from B2B's best and brightest to help you pace the changing global B2B industry. But now it's time to turn our attention to the real world. Most B2B brands are global, yet global B2B brand marketing remains a considerable challenge. But what approaches address and drive success from top of the funnel all the way through the pipeline and across geographies? Well, let's welcome my co-host. We are putting him through his paces today. It is Craig Duxbury, who will lead the conversation.
Welcome to the Grow Show. Now, the clue is in the name, but growth is such a broad spectrum for B2B marketers whose job it is to drive growth within the organisations and create that shareholder value. Now, we've got an amazing panel of guests today who I'm shortly going to just introduce you to. So please just bear with me for a second. Because that area of growth, as I said, is really, really broad. And during times of uncertainty, whether that be economically, whether it be politically, or even growing trends such as, globalization. Is there still such a thing? Have we moved away from it? Have we moved toward regionalization or even localization? And I think for the purpose of today's show, this is where we're going to concentrate because it's fresh. There are many studies across spectrums of B2B, but this is one which is pretty fertile, very much untapped. But as I say, we're extremely fortunate today to be joined, or I am, by three amazing people who are going to help us to unpack this. First of all, I'm going to say hello to Anamika Gupta, who is the head of customer marketing at Honeywell Process Solutions. Hello, Anamika. Thank you for joining us all the way from, I'm hoping, sunny Dallas.
Hello, Craig. Thank you for having me here.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much. Also, Goodman Sem, who is the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at Man & Hummel. Okay, I've got to get that the right way around. Gutman, Viking of B2B, the Norwegian. Okay, absolutely fantastic man, and we're going to actually delve in a little bit deeper there. And then also, Cos Mingades, is a pleasure to have you with us, my friend. Thank you for joining us from the agency side, represented with myself. Before we unpack this whole topic of global, regional, local, you know, it's fraught with complexities. When you look at things across balance of power, when you look at things about the role of the centre versus the regions, who owns the customer, who owns the revenue, and barriers to things from it. So we're going to actually, I think this is definitely an area and a topic which needs, we use the phrase shattering the past, because I believe the models are outdated, the ways in which B2B marketing is done there is outdated. I know these are going to be opinions shared fondly by my guest today. And we're going to look at them in three areas and unpack that. The first one is around a change in organisational and operational structures for it. The second one is then around the need for greater emotional bonding and connections between the people within regions or locally with the centre. And then the third one is how do we actually drive that culture of B2B marketing effectiveness within it. So we're going to unpack that one by one. Anamika, I'm going to come to you first of all, please. You know, there is definitely a growing trend that people within regions want to be sharing best practices and doing it, but there's no hiding the fact that when that takes place, barriers and obstacles and self-interest and the rest can come in. So how at Honeywell are you unpacking this and tackling it?
Again, thank you for having me, Craig. I think I have the biggest seat there and the biggest monitor. It's a great setup. I love it. Before we get into the, answering a question, I just want to make sure that, first of all, I set up and let you know who Honeywell is, right? Because that kind of defines how we manage the team globally. And of course, there are barriers that we face and how we kind of tackle those in day to day. So we are an American publicly traded multinational conglomerate corporation. We are headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina. We primarily operate in 4 areas of business: aerospace, building technologies,